Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. If I wake up from this surgery, please don't call me son anymore. The words left my lips as a dry, cracking whisper, barely audible above the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor beside my gurney. They felt monumental, a line drawn in the sand of my own life, here, under the sterile, unforgiving glare of the surgical prep room lights. There was no more room for ambiguity. The air was cold, smelling of antiseptic and the faint, metallic scent of fear, my own. My body, covered by a thin, paper-like gown, felt like a map of previous battles, faint scars from earlier. Less invasive procedures were pale lines against my skin, testaments to a journey that felt both infinitely long and terrifyingly new. Each intervention had been a step toward this moment, yet the finality of it was suffocating. The fear wasn't about the pain. I had grown accustomed to pain, had learned to compartmentalize it as a necessary toll. No, the fear that coiled in my stomach was a more insidious one. What if I'm going too far? What if, after all this, I'm still wrong? Dr. Evans came into view, her face framed by a blue surgical cap, her eyes, magnified slightly by her glasses, were calm and direct. She checked the IV drip in my arm, her touch practiced and impersonal, yet her voice was anything but. "We're not here to fix a mistake, Ava," she said, her voice low and steady. She had started using my name weeks ago, and every time she said it, a piece of me clicked into place. Think of this as an alignment. We're simply helping your body match the blueprint that's been there all along. An alignment. I clung to that word. It wasn't a destruction of the old, but a refinement of the true. It was a promise that I wasn't a collection of broken parts to be mended, but a coherent whole that had been improperly assembled. The door swished open, and my brother, Caleb, stepped in. His face was a mess of emotions, worry etched into the lines around his eyes, but a fierce, protective love in his gaze. He looked tired, as if he'd been shouldering my anxiety alongside his own. He came to my side, his large, warm hand enveloping mine. His calloused fingers were a familiar comfort, a link to a childhood where he was my defender in scrape-knee skirmishes and my partner in backyard forts. "Hey," he said, his voice thick. "You ready for this?" I tried to nod, but it was more of a weak tremor. My eyes burned. "I'm so scared. Caleb!" He squeezed my hand tighter. "I know, but I'm right here, and I'll be here when you wake up." He leaned down, his forehead resting against my temple for a moment. He smelled like coffee and the crisp autumn air from outside. When he pulled back, his eyes were shining. "I'm so proud of you, Ava." He paused, and the next two words he spoke were the most profound gift I had ever received. My sister. It was the first time a member of my family had said it out loud, without hesitation, without a prompt. The word landed in the chaotic space of my heart and silenced everything else. Sister. It was a key turning in a lock I didn't even know was still rusted shut. A wave of gratitude so intense it felt like grief washed over me, and a single hot tear escaped and traced a path down my cheek. Before I could respond, the anesthesiologist was at my side, her voice a soothing murmur as she spoke of drifting off to sleep. The world began to soften at the edges, Caleb's face blurring into a watercolor painting of love and concern. My last coherent thought was not of the scalpel or the pain, but of his voice, echoing in my mind. Sister. Waking up was not a sudden jolt. It was a slow, syrupy ascent from a deep, dreamless ocean. The first sensation was of a profound strangeness in my own body. It wasn't pain, not yet. The nerve block and the morphine drip were holding that beast at bay. It was a quiet, a hollowness, an empty space where a familiar weight and presence used to be. It was the feeling of a phantom limb, but in reverse. I was aware not of something that was gone, but of the empty, peaceful space it had left behind. My breath hitched. The sheets felt impossibly soft against my skin, a texture I felt with my entire body. Each beep from the monitor seemed to vibrate through the mattress. I kept my eyes closed, wanting to live in this purely physical moment of rediscovery. I took a shallow breath, then another, feeling my chest rise and fall. It felt lighter. Everything felt lighter. I was inhabiting a new geography, A landscape that was still numb and bandaged, but unmistakably mine. The hope I'd been too terrified to entertain for years began to unfurl within me, a fragile green shoot pushing its way through concrete. I wasn't happy yet. Happiness was a destination still far in the distance, but for the first time, lying in that quiet, humming recovery room, I was allowing myself to believe I might one day have a map to get there. The journey hadn't ended in this operating room, it had just truly, finally begun. Caleb's apartment became my sanctuary. It was a small second-floor walk-up that always smelled faintly of sawdust from his carpentry projects and the lemon dish soap he used. He set me up in his own bedroom, taking the lumpy pull-out couch in the living room without a word of complaint. The days that followed were a blur of sleep, medication schedules, and Caleb's surprisingly decent cooking. He moved with a quiet, gentle efficiency, changing my bandages, making sure I took my pills, and sitting with me for hours while we watched old movies. His presence a silent, unwavering bulwark of support. A week after I came home from the hospital, the next phase began. The hormones. My endocrinologist had given me the first dose, and now it was up to me to maintain the regimen every other morning. I'd carefully swab a patch of skin on my thigh and apply the clear estradiol gel. It felt like such a small, mundane ritual for such a monumental task. This tiny daily act was supposed to continue the work the surgery had started, to slowly, cell by cell, coax my body into a new reality. The changes weren't like a thunderclap, they were like the shifting of seasons, so gradual you could almost miss them if you weren't paying attention. But I was paying rapt attention. I was a scientist and my own body was the grand experiment. My skin was the first thing I truly noticed. It grew softer, losing a certain resilience and taking on a new, finer texture. I'd find myself just stroking the back of my own hand, mesmerized by the subtle difference. Then came the sensitivity. A cool breeze from the open window would raise goosebumps that felt sharper, more electric than before. The seams on my pajamas, the soft, worn-in cotton Caleb had lent me, suddenly felt more pronounced against my skin. It was as if the volume of my tactile senses had been turned up. The emotional shifts were more jarring. I became porous to the world in a way I'd never been. A sentimental commercial could make my eyes well up. A kind word from Caleb would send a wave of affection so powerful it made my chest ache. But it wasn't all soft feelings. A flicker of frustration could just as easily boil over into a hot surge of anger or, more often, dissolve into helpless, shuddering sobs. It was disorienting, feeling like a passenger in my own emotional vehicle, my hands not quite firm on the wheel. I felt raw, exposed, and achingly vulnerable. Shame became a frequent, unwelcome visitor, creeping in at odd moments, whispering that I was too much, too sensitive, too broken. One afternoon, about a month into my recovery, a package arrived. It was from our mom, Diane. I hadn't spoken to her much since the surgery. Our calls were stilted, filled with her hesitant questions and my monosyllabic answers. Inside the box, nestled in tissue paper, were a few items of clothing. Not frilly dresses or anything overtly complicated, but simple, soft-looking basics. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted out a t-shirt. It was a heather gray cotton, a simple crew neck but with a distinctly feminine cut, a shorter sleeve, a slight tapering at the waist, a wider, more delicate collar. For a long time, I just held it. It was just a shirt, a simple piece of fabric, but it felt loaded, symbolic. It was an invitation, a permission slip. After Caleb left for work that evening, I decided to try it on. I was still mostly living in oversized sweatpants and his old t-shirts, my body tender and adjusting. Standing in his bathroom, I slowly peeled off the shirt I was wearing. My reflection was still a stranger's. The hormonal changes were subtle. My shoulders still seemed too broad, my frame too angular, but my face was softer, the lines around my jaw less defined. I pulled the new t-shirt over my head. The material was light, impossibly soft, and it draped over my torso in a way I wasn't used to. The cotton clung gently around my waist and hips. Not tight, but present. It wasn't a boxy, formless tent like the men's shirts I'd spent my life in. This shirt acknowledged that my body had curves. I looked in the mirror, and an unconscious, unlearned instinct took over. My shoulders rounded slightly, pulling inward. My posture shifted. My head tilted. It was a small, defensive gesture, a subtle attempt to make myself smaller, more contained. It was a feminine reflex I had never been taught, one that seemed to spring from some deep, cellular memory that was only now being unlocked. The fabric, so thin and soft, felt both like a shield and an exposed nerve. The bathroom door creaked open. I jumped, my heart hammering against my ribs as I saw Caleb standing in the doorway, a grocery bag in his hand. He must have forgotten something. My first instinct was to cross my arms over my chest, to hide. Shame, hot and immediate, flooded my cheeks. But Caleb didn't mock. He didn't look shocked or even surprised. He just looked at me. His gaze was steady, observant. He took in the shirt, my posture, the fearful look in my eyes. He was silent for a long moment, and then a slow, gentle smile touched his lips. "You know," he said, his voice soft. "For the first time, you look right." He shifted the grocery bag in his arm. "You look more like you." He then turned and walked into the kitchen, the moment over as quickly as it had begun. He didn't make a big deal of it. He didn't need to. His words echoed in the quiet bathroom, a simple, profound validation that cut through the fog of my fear. More like you. Maybe I wasn't just performing. Maybe I wasn't playing dress up. Maybe, just maybe, I was finally, slowly, coming home to myself. I looked back at my reflection in the mirror, and for the first time, I didn't see a man in a woman's shirt. I just saw me, Ava. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning. It was my mother, usually. Our conversations were brief, circling around my health with a cautious politeness that felt like walking on eggshells. But this time, her voice had a different tone. There was a nervous energy to it, a purpose. "Ava," she began, fumbling the name just slightly, a tiny hesitation she was still working to overcome. "I was thinking I need to run some errands on Saturday, and I was wondering if you'd like to come with me. Maybe we could buy you a few things, proper things." The implication hung in the air between us. She meant women's things. She was offering to take me shopping. An image flashed in my mind, my teenage self, sullen and miserable, being dragged through the men's department at Sears, the rough denim and stiff plaid shirts feeling like a costume for a role I hated playing. This invitation was the polar opposite of that, a bridge being extended over a chasm of unspoken pain and misunderstanding. "Okay," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes, I'd like that." When Saturday came, my stomach was a knot of anxiety. Mom picked me up from Caleb's apartment, and the car ride was filled with a thick, heavy silence. She drove us to a department store at the mall, a place I hadn't set foot in for years. But instead of turning towards the racks of jeans and sweaters, she led me toward a section in the back of the store, a softly lit area with plush carpeting and the quiet hum of female energy, the lingerie department. It felt like stepping into another world. The air was warm and smelled faintly of new fabric and a light, floral perfume. Soft, ambient music played from hidden speakers. Racks of bras and underwear were arranged by color and style. A sea of satin, lace, and soft cotton in every shade imaginable. I felt completely out of my depth, a trespasser in a sacred space. My hands started to tremble, and I instinctively shoved them into the pockets of the hoodie I was wearing. Mom seemed to sense my panic. She didn't say anything, but she gently guided me towards a rack of simple cotton items. "Let's just start here," she murmured. A saleswoman approached us, a warm, middle-aged woman with kind eyes. "Can I help you ladies find anything today?" she asked, her gaze including both of us. The casual use of the word ladies sent a small jolt through me. Mom cleared her throat. "My daughter, she's looking for her first proper set. We're not sure about her size." The woman's smile never wavered. She looked at me with a professional, appraising eye. "Of course, that's what I'm here for. Why don't we step into a fitting room, and I'll get you a measuring tape. We'll find something comfortable to start." Inside the fitting room, my heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The space was small, private, with a three-way mirror and soft, flattering light. The saleswoman was a model of gentle efficiency, taking my measurements with a practiced hand, her conversation light and easy, putting me at ease. She returned a few minutes later with a few options: simple, non-wired bras in neutral colors and several pairs of cotton briefs in a classic. comfortable cut. "Just start with these," she said with an encouraging nod. "See how they feel." Left alone, I stood staring at the items hanging on the hook. My hands shook as I reached for a soft, beige bra. The fabric was smooth and cool to the touch. I unhooked it and, with clumsy fingers, put it on, fumbling with the clasp at the back. It took 3 tries before I got it right. Then I slipped off my loose-fitting boxer shorts and pulled on a pair of the cotton panties. They settled onto my hips, the soft elastic a gentle presence against my skin. I turned to face the mirror, and then I stopped breathing. It wasn't a sexual feeling. It wasn't about looking seductive or alluring. It was a feeling I could only describe as correctness, a sense of profound alignment. The bra provided a gentle shape to my chest, which was just beginning to show the soft budding from the hormones. The underwear fit my body snugly, following its lines instead of hanging off them. For my entire life, the first layer of clothing I put on my body had felt wrong. Boxers that were too loose here, too tight there. A constant, low-grade reminder of a body that didn't feel like my own. But this felt right. The foundation was right. The pieces were finally in their proper places. My eyes traveled up from my body to my face in the mirror. I saw the fear and the uncertainty still lingering in my expression. But for the first time, I didn't immediately look away. I held my own gaze. I saw the softer lines of my cheeks, the way my eyes looked larger now that I wasn't constantly scowling at the world. The body looking back at me was still a work in progress. A canvas midway through a painting, but it was my canvas, and for the first time, I wasn't ashamed of it. There was a soft knock on the door. "How are we doing in there?" It was my mother. "Come in," I said, my voice watery. She opened the door a crack, then stepped inside, her eyes full of a hesitant, fragile hope. She looked at me, standing there in the bra and underwear, and her carefully composed expression crumbled, her eyes filled with tears. She stepped forward and put a hand on my arm, her touch feather-light. "Oh, honey," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry for what I asked. Confused?" "For not seeing you," she said, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path through her makeup. "For not seeing the beautiful daughter who was right in front of me all along. I'm so sorry it took me so long to see." In that small, warmly lit fitting room, surrounded by lace and silk, a wound that I had carried for decades finally began to heal. I had spent my life hiding myself, even from myself. But the lingerie, the very things that were meant to be hidden from the world, were the first things that made me feel truly seen. As I started dressing, I noticed I was moving differently. I sat down on the small stool to put on my shoes, my knees naturally staying close together. When I adjusted the collar of my shirt, my hand moved with a new, unpracticed delicacy. These small gestures, these quiet shifts in posture and movement, were bubbling up from that same deep well of instinct. They weren't a performance. They were an awakening. "There's a group I think you'd like," Caleb said one evening, scrolling through his phone as he sat on the end of the couch. "It's a support network for trans women. Low-key, just coffee and conversation. It's tomorrow night. Wanna go." My immediate gut reaction was a spike of pure terror. Going out in public as me, I had barely left the apartment since the surgery, content to exist in the safe cocoon Caleb had created. The outside world, with its unpredictable stares and potential for judgment, felt like a hostile planet. "I don't know, Caleb," I stammered. I don't think I'm ready." "You don't have to be perfectly ready, Ava," he said, looking up from his phone. His expression was gentle but firm. "You just have to be willing to take one small step. I'll drive you. I'll wait in the car. If you hate it, you can leave after 5 minutes. No questions asked." His offer disarmed my fear. It wasn't a push. It was a safety net. I took a deep, shaky breath. Okay, I'll go." The next 24 hours were a slow-motion storm of anxiety and anticipation. What would I wear? The question consumed me. This wouldn't be a t-shirt at home or lingerie in a private fitting room. This was for the world. After an hour of agonizing, I settled on an outfit that felt like a compromise between visibility and security. I chose a simple navy blue midi skirt, the A-line cut modest and forgiving, and paired it with a soft cream-colored sweater. Over it all, I wore a light denim jacket, a piece of armor I could button up if I felt too exposed. Then came the makeup. I'd watched dozens of tutorials online, but my hands were clumsy. I kept it minimal, a little concealer under my eyes to hide the nervous. Sleepless shadows, a single coat of mascara to make my eyes feel more open, and a tinted lip balm that gave my lips just a hint of color. It was a 5-minute process that took me 45. When I was finally ready, I stood before the full-length mirror on Caleb's closet door. I saw a woman who looked nervous and fragile, but a woman nonetheless. The skirt swayed just slightly as I shifted my weight. I was acutely, intensely aware of my own body. I could feel the soft knit of the sweater against my skin, the way the denim jacket rested on my shoulders, and the gentle, constant brush of the skirt's fabric against my thighs and calves as I moved. It was a constant stream of new sensory information. The walk from the apartment door to Caleb's car felt like a mile-long trek across a battlefield. Every sound a distant siren, a barking dog, the rustle of leaves seemed magnified. I was sure every curtain in every window held a pair of watching, judging eyes. The community center was only a 10-minute drive away. Caleb pulled up to the curb. "I'll be right here," he said, giving me a reassuring nod. "Call or text if you need anything at all." Taking a deep breath, I got out of the car. The evening air was cool, and it immediately found its way under the hem of my skirt. A strange, new sensation that was both startling and pleasant. It made me feel connected to the world in a way I never had before. A gust of wind blew a strand of my hair across my face, and I instinctively reached up to tuck it behind my ear. As I approached the entrance, a man who was leaving the building held the glass door open for me. He smiled a generic, polite smile. "After you, ma'am," he said. The word hit me with the force of a physical blow. Ma'am. He hadn't hesitated. He hadn't given me a strange, double-take look. He had just seen a woman and acted accordingly. My feet faltered for a half-second. 1,000 emotions, shock, relief, giddy joy, and a sudden urge to cry crashed over me all at once. I managed to duck my head and mumble a quiet, "Thank you," before hurrying inside, my cheeks burning. The meeting was in a small, cozy room with mismatched armchairs and a pot of coffee brewing in the corner. There were about 10 other women there, all at different ages and stages in their journeys. The atmosphere wasn't clinical or somber. It was warm, filled with easy laughter and conversation. I found an empty chair in the corner, my hands clenched tightly around the strap of my purse. For the first 20 minutes, I just listened, my heart gradually slowing to a normal rhythm. A woman with vibrant pink hair was talking about her struggles with her company's HR department. Another, an older woman with a kind, grandmotherly face, shared a story about seeing her new driver's license with the correct gender marker for the first time. They were stories of pain and frustration, but also of triumph and resilience. They were my stories. During a lull in the conversation, the woman next to me, whose name was Sarah, turned to me. She had a warm smile and gentle eyes. "That's a beautiful color on you," she said, nodding at my sweater. "It makes you look very serene." The compliment was so simple, so genuine. It wasn't a loud comment on my appearance, but a quiet woman-to-woman observation. "Thank you," I managed to say, a real smile finally reaching my own lips. We started talking. She asked me how long I'd been on hormones, and I told her. She shared some of her own early experiences, the little moments of discovery and doubt. As she spoke, she grew more animated, her hands moving to emphasize a point, at one point, to gently get my attention as someone else walked by. She reached out and placed her hand lightly on my forearm. The touch was brief, casual, and utterly platonic, but for me, it was electric. It was a touch of easy, unconscious familiarity. It was a gesture of connection, an acknowledgement that I was part of this circle, that I belonged. It wasn't about attraction, it was about acceptance. It was an intimate, non-sexual recognition of my personhood, of my womanhood. I realized then that this was what I had been so afraid of, and also what I had been so desperately craving. Not just to be seen as a woman, but to be treated as one. To be included in the subtle, unspoken language of female connection. I was not just playing a role, I was learning to live, to exist, to connect, and to be, all at the same time. I stayed for the entire meeting. The confidence I had found at the support group was a fragile, beautiful thing. It carried me through the next couple of weeks on a wave of tentative optimism. I started venturing out on my own for small errands, a trip to the grocery store, a walk to the coffee shop on the corner, each successful. Uneventful outing was a small victory, another brick laid in the foundation of my new life. The crisis, when it came, was born from something insignificant. It happened in the dairy aisle of the supermarket. I was reaching for a carton of oat milk when a woman and her young daughter walked past me. The little girl, who was maybe 5 or 6, was staring at me with the unfiltered, unabashed curiosity of a child. I smiled at her, a small, polite gesture. The girl turned to her mother and, in a voice that was far too loud for the quiet aisle, asked, "Mommy, why does that lady have a man's voice?" Time stopped. The air seemed to crystallize around me. The mother's face flushed with embarrassment. She shushed her daughter, muttering a frantic, "Honey, we don't say things like that," and quickly pulled her away down the aisle, shooting an apologetic, pitying look back at me. Her pity was worse than a glare. My hand, still outstretched toward the milk, began to shake. A hot, prickling wave of shame washed over me, so powerful it made me feel dizzy. Man's voice, man's voice. The words echoed in my head, a vicious, relentless mantra. Every insecurity I had ever had came roaring back to the surface. My height, the width of my shoulders, the size of my hands, the stubborn shadow of a beard that hormones hadn't fully erased. I suddenly felt like a fraud, a grotesque parody in a skirt and sweater. All my progress felt like a delusion, a thin, flimsy veneer that had just been shattered by the innocent observation of a child. I abandoned my shopping cart in the middle of the aisle and practically ran out of the store. I walked the few blocks back to Caleb's apartment in a daze, my eyes fixed on the pavement, convinced that every person I passed was staring, pointing, and whispering. When I burst through the door, Caleb was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner. He took one look at my face and his own expression fell. "Ava, what happened? Are you okay?" I couldn't speak. A sob was clawing its way up my throat. I fled to the bathroom and locked the door, leaning my back against it as the tears finally came, hot and furious. I looked at myself in the mirror, but I didn't see Ava anymore. I saw a man in a costume. I saw a pathetic, deluded fool. With frantic, angry movements, I started tearing the clothes off. The sweater came first, pulled violently over my head, then the skirt, which I unzipped and let fall to the floor in a heap. The bra, which moments ago had felt like a symbol of correctness, now felt like a cage, a lie. I fumbled with the clasp and flung it into the corner. I rummaged through the laundry hamper until I found what I was looking for, a pair of old, worn-out jeans and a faded, shapeless sweatshirt from my old life. They were things I'd kept for lounging around the apartment, relics I hadn't had the heart to throw away. I pulled them on. The denim was rough and abrasive against my newly sensitive skin. It constricted my hips and thighs in a way that felt alien and suffocating. The sweatshirt was a heavy, boxy shroud, erasing any hint of a figure, hanging from my shoulders like a sack. The feeling was instantaneous and sickening. It was the wrongness, the deep, soul-crushing wrongness that had been my constant companion for 30 years, the feeling I had started to forget. There was a soft knock on the door. "Ava, can you let me in? Please talk to me." I unlocked the door and shuffled out, my eyes on the floor. Caleb stood there, his face etched with worry. He looked me up and down, taking in the old clothes, my tear-streaked face. He didn't say, "What are you wearing?" or "Why did you change?" He just said, "Tell me what happened." Leaning against the wall, my voice hoarse and broken, I told him about the little girl, about her mother, about the feeling of being seen as a joke. When I finished, Caleb was quiet for a long time. I expected him to offer some empty platitude, something like, "Don't listen to them or you look beautiful to me." But he didn't. He leaned against the opposite wall, crossing his arms, so he said, his voice thoughtful, which feels worse. What I asked, confused. "Which feeling is worse?" he repeated. "The embarrassment you felt in the store for a few seconds, or how you feel right now, standing here in those clothes?" His question cut through my hysteria. I looked down at myself, at the stiff, uncomfortable jeans, the suffocating sweatshirt. I thought about the feeling. It wasn't just physical discomfort. It was a deep internal dissonance, a feeling of being fundamentally out of sync with myself, like a key grinding in the wrong lock. It was the feeling of slowly suffocating. And I compared it to the sharp, stinging shame I'd felt in the supermarket. That had been painful, yes, humiliating, but it was an external wound, inflicted by the outside world. This feeling, the one these old clothes produced, was an internal one. It was a sickness from within. "This," I whispered, my voice cracking. I looked up and met his eyes. "This is 1,000 times worse." He nodded slowly. "Right," he said. "You didn't start this journey to look convincing to a 5-year-old in the grocery store. You're not changing to be more palatable for other people. You're changing so you can finally breathe. Don't ever forget that. The rest is just noise." He was right. The whole crisis had been about how others saw me. I had allowed an external opinion to invalidate my internal reality. But my reality was this: the dress, the skirt, the soft sweater that wasn't the costume. That was me. This, the rough denim and the formless sweatshirt. This was the costume I had been forced to wear my entire life. In that moment, I understood. Dressing as Ava wasn't an act of deception. It was an act of profound honesty. It was my body's language finally finding the right words, the right vocabulary to tell the truth. The noise from the outside world would always be there, but I could choose, for the first time, not to let it be the only thing I heard. A few months later, on a warm, sun-drenched Saturday in late summer, Caleb decided to throw me a party. It wasn't for my actual birthday, which was in the cold depths of February. He called it my first birthday, a celebration of my first year of truly living. It was a small affair, just a handful of close friends, a few people from my support group, and our mom, all gathered in the small green backyard of his apartment building. In the weeks leading up to it, the old anxieties had tried to surface. A party where I would be the center of attention. But something was different this time. The panic was a faint echo rather than a deafening roar. The lessons from my crisis day had stuck. My focus had shifted inward. The most pressing question wasn't, "What will they think of me, Boa? What do I want to wear to my own party?" That question led me on a solo shopping trip, a milestone that felt just as significant as the first one with my mother. This time, I went alone, not with trepidation, but with a sense of purpose. I spent an afternoon browsing the racks of a small boutique downtown, touching fabrics, considering silhouettes, and actually enjoying the process. I wasn't trying to find something to hide in or a garment that screamed, "I am a woman." I was simply looking for a dress that I liked, a dress that felt like me. I found it on a clearance rack. It was a simple wrap dress, the color of a summer sky, dotted with tiny white wildflowers. The fabric was a soft, breathable rayon that felt cool against my skin. When I tried it on in the fitting room, I knew it was the one. It skimmed my body in a way that felt elegant and comfortable. The V-neck modest, the tie waist giving me a shape that felt natural. It wasn't trying too hard, it was just pretty. On the day of the party, as I got ready, there was a new ease to my movements. I put on my now familiar underwear and a simple, comfortable bra. I slipped the dress on, tying the sash at my side. I sat at the small vanity Caleb had helped me set up in my room and applied my makeup with a steady, practiced hand. It was no longer a daunting act of camouflage, but a pleasant meditative ritual. As I moved around the backyard, greeting guests and helping Caleb with drinks, I realized I wasn't fidgeting. I wasn't tugging at my hemline or subconsciously crossing my arms over my chest. I wasn't constantly hyper-aware of how the fabric was lying or how I was standing. My body had, at last, become accustomed to this. The feeling of a dress against my legs was no longer a shocking novelty. It was just the feeling of my clothes. I moved with a relaxed grace that I hadn't known I possessed. My body and my presentation finally in harmony. I was just Ava, at a party, wearing a dress. The simplicity of it was breathtaking. After we had eaten, Caleb tapped his glass with a fork. Gathering everyone's attention, he stood by the picnic table, his face glowing with a mixture of pride and affection. "I don't want to make a big, sappy speech," he started, a smile playing on his lips. I just want to say one thing. For a long time, I had a sibling who was one of the strongest, bravest people I knew, but who was also one of the saddest. This past year, I've gotten to watch that same strong, brave person finally become happy, and it's the best thing I've ever gotten to see. So I'd like to raise a glass to my sister. Ava, I'm so glad you're here. His words, so simple and so public, hit me right in the chest. I could feel tears welling up. But this time, they weren't tears of shame or fear. They were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. A round of applause and cheers of "to Ava" went around the small circle of guests. Then my mother, who had been sitting quietly, stood up. Her hands were trembling slightly as she held her glass. She looked directly at me, her eyes shining. Caleb said it perfectly. She began, her voice thick with emotion. I just want to add, to my daughter, Ava, seeing you happy is the greatest gift a mother could ever ask for. I love you. My daughter, she said it clearly, proudly, in front of everyone. It was the final public seal of approval, a declaration of love and acceptance that echoed everything my heart had been longing to hear. The small backyard felt like a cathedral, consecrated by the love of the people who mattered most. Later, as the sun began to set, my friend Sarah from the support group suggested we take a photo. She gathered me, Caleb, and a few others together as we arranged ourselves. Another friend, a man named Mark, came to stand beside me. As someone else held up a phone to take the picture, he casually rested his hand on the small of my back to pull our group closer together. It was a completely innocent, friendly gesture, but in that moment, it was everything. A year ago, a touch like that from a man would have sent me recoiling, my body tensing with a lifetime of ingrained dysphoria and fear. But now, I didn't flinch. I didn't even think about it. The touch felt natural, appropriate, friendly. My body didn't register it as a threat or a mistake. It registered it simply as a kind touch between friends. My reaction wasn't a conscious choice. It was an integrated, subconscious reality. In that small, quiet moment, I knew I had truly arrived. I wasn't performing. I was simply being. The sun filters through the blinds, painting stripes of light across the hardwood floor. It's a Wednesday morning, ordinary in every way. The only sounds are the hum of the refrigerator and the distant murmur of city traffic waking up. I sit on the edge of my bed, bathed in the quiet morning glow, and the first thing I do is simply stretch, feeling the pleasant pull in my muscles, my body feeling rested and wholly my own. There is no sense of occasion, no looming anxiety, no grand performance to prepare for. There is just the simple, unhurried routine of getting ready for the day. I walk to my dresser, my bare feet silent on the floor. I open a drawer and pull out a matching set of simple, pale pink cotton lingerie. The fabric is soft and familiar against my skin as I dress. There is no tremor in my hands, no moment of stunned discovery in front of the mirror. This is just the first layer of my clothes, the foundation for the day. It's as natural and thoughtless as brushing my teeth. Next, I go to my closet. It's no longer a place of confusion or terror, but a collection of textures and colors that bring me a quiet sense of joy. I run my hand over the different fabrics, the smooth rayon of my birthday dress, the soft knit of a favorite cardigan, the crisp cotton of a button-up shirt. Today, I choose a simple black A-line skirt and a silk blend blouse the color of moss. The clothes slip on easily, settling into place with a comfortable familiarity. The skirt whispers against my legs as I walk to the bathroom. My makeup routine is pared down to an efficient 5 minutes. A little tinted moisturizer, a quick curl of my eyelashes and a coat of mascara, a swipe of lip gloss. I look at my reflection as I work, but I'm not scrutinizing or judging. I'm just looking at my face. I see the way the hormones have softened my features, the arch of my eyebrows, the faint smile lines forming at the corners of my eyes. It is simply my face, Ava's face. As I stand there, putting a pair of small silver hoops in my ears, a profound sense of peace washes over me. I think back to that terrified person in the hospital bed, whispering a desperate plea into the antiseptic air. I think about the woman trembling in a fitting room, discovering her own reflection for the first time. I think of the panicked flight from the grocery store, the feeling of the wrong clothes suffocating me. Those moments feel like scenes from someone else's life, or at least from a lifetime ago. The dresses, the makeup, the name they were once tools of a terrifying and exhilarating transformation. Each step felt monumental, a deliberate and conscious act of becoming. Putting on a skirt was a political statement. Wearing a bra was a profound psychological realignment. Being called ma'am by a stranger was a life-altering event. But now, it is just life. The clothes are no longer a costume I am putting on. They are simply my clothes. The makeup is not a mask I am hiding behind. It is just a way I enjoy presenting myself to the world. The process is no longer a ritual fraught with meaning. It is just getting dressed in the morning. The great seismic shift has settled. The transformation I so desperately chased wasn't about the surgery or the hormones or the wardrobe. Not really. Those were just the tools. The real transformation happened quietly. On the inside, it was the slow, patient unlearning of a lifetime of shame. It was the gradual acceptance that I wasn't inventing a new person, but rather, I was finally allowing the person who had been there all along to come out into the light. The cross-dressing, the careful artifice, it was all a bridge. It was the necessary scaffolding I used to build the house I was always meant to live in. But now, the house is built. It is sturdy and comfortable, and the scaffolding has long since been taken down. There is no more role to play. There is no more performance. There is only me. I pick up my purse, grab my keys from the hook by the door, and get ready to leave for work. It is just another Wednesday, and I am just Ava, and that, I realize, is the most beautiful and extraordinary thing of all. I didn't become a woman overnight. I just finally stopped pretending I wasn't one.